What we're going to look at now are procedures, parameter passing, procedural overloading, and functions, and all their purposes. All I've got is some code with a sprite font loaded, and that's what we're going to use to output some data. So let's create a procedure, and the simplest way to create a procedure is to do public void add, open and close bracket, open and close square bracket. Here we have a procedure. It is named add, it is of type void, and it is public. I will explain the void later. A procedure is code which we can run as many times as we wish. So, for example, I could say game batch.drawString font game font 1, and you are running the procedure add, like so. New vector 2 200 200 color dot white, like so. And then I could, in my game draw, just say add, like so, and it would run add, which is this procedure we've just created, and it will say you are running the procedure add, as you can see. Very simple. Basically, it gets to this line, it looks for add, and it runs it. However, what we can do is we can do something called parameter passing. We can send data to the procedure via these brackets. So let's say I wanted to send the position to this procedure. I wanted to output the text start. I could say that, well, I need a vector 2. I'm going to call it pos. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw it at the position pos. And for this to work, I need to give it a position. A new vector 2, 2020. Run. Let's have a look. So now you can see it's running. You are running the procedure add, but it's drawing it at 2020. The advantage of parameter passing that we have done is I can copy, paste. Let's say we'll paste in a lot of adds, and I'm just going to mess around with the positions. I'll make that one 200, I'll make that one 200, I'll make that 140, that 30, I don't know, 80, 60, 8, 90, 27, 270, like that. And if I run, it will output them all at the different positions. That is called using procedures and parameter passing. Like so. I could create another variable, let's say a bool draw, and I could say if draw then run, and here this time I'm going to set true, 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 and then for these I'll set false, oops, I did that one a bit wrong, false and false. So only the ones that we set true through will draw, the rest won't. And that is parameter passing. Now parameter passing allows us to reuse the same code without copying and pasting, because for this to happen otherwise it would take a lot more lines of code. Not so much with this, but let's say we had a very long procedure, let's say 20 lines long. Every time we called it up we'd be saving 20 lines of code. And that is the purpose of a procedure. Now, though, we can get procedures that act like variables. We can create a procedure, but it's a variable, it stores data, but it's read-only. However, what we can do is when we try reading that data, we can set the code we wish to run, so we can get code to execute when we are reading what data is stored within the variable. It's technically called a function. So here, let's say we create a function, and instead of void we'll enter int, and basically that's saying that that add is an integer as a variable, but also it will also, not only is it an integer, it will also run any code which is in between these two brackets. So I'm going to say return 10. And all return does is it sets the variable, in this case add, to the number here, in this case 10. So let's say I will just output, I'll create an integer, temp, and I'm going to say that temp equals add. Now, because it's a function, it needs to match the open and close brackets when we create our function here. And then I'm going to go game batch dot draw string game font 1, and then I'm going to say temp dot toString, so that will get the integer temp and it will convert it to a string. A new vector 2 300 300 color dot white, like so, and it will output 10 on the screen. As you can see, it's outputted 10 quite nicely. Now though, what we've called this add for a reason. So let's say we want it to add two numbers together, in which case we need two numbers. So we're going to have an integer num1 and we're going to have an integer num2. What we're going to say is we're going to say that num1 plus num2. So what will happen when we access the variable add, or the function add, it requires two variables, number 1, number 2. It will add them together and save the result in add. So let's say I was to say 20 and 50, temp will equal adding 20 and 50 together, or the variable add, which we know will be 70. And as you can see, outputs 70 on the screen. And that is a function. So we've looked at a function and we've looked at procedures. We've also looked at parameter passing, which is this, when we say what parameters or variables we require, and then we enter or give them those variables right there. There is one more thing to look at though, operator overloading. Let's say I had this situation here. Oops, sorry. Let's say I've undone too much code. Let's say I had an add procedure, but then I wanted to add three numbers together, so I might call it add 3 and add 4 for 4 numbers, and then I could say int number 3, int number 4. Now that is perfectly acceptable. What I could do is, if I wanted to add 3 numbers together, instead of add, I could add 3 and enter another number. But there is a better way, and it is called operator overloading. Let me just show you something. If I was to do add and open bracket, you see it just says enter num1 and num2. However, let's get rid of these 3 and 4. Basically, what I have done here is I have created 3 different functions, all called add. The only way to identify them is the fact that they require different parameters. This one requires 2 integers, this one requires 3, and this one is going to require 4, like so. So, how then do we know which one to run? Well, it all depends on what parameters we give it. This instance, we have given it 2 parameters, in which case it will look for the nearest one with 2 parameters, in which case it's this. However, let's say I give it 3 parameters, you'll notice that as soon as I press the comma, it gives us a list of 3 options. And these are all the different parameters we can pass into our function. So I'm going to say 60, and immediately it will run this function add instead of this function. And if I was to give it another parameter, i.e. 4 parameters, it would run this function here instead of the previous one. Of course, the code needs changing to like this, number 3 plus number 4. And here we have used procedural overloading to our function add. Now, I'm not going to go over it any more than that. This is only a simple example of procedures, functions, and procedural and function overloading, but hopefully you'll be able to grasp it and apply it into your own games.